Ambassador Keiko Chun stood in the center of the Grand Council chamber, surrounded by beings from across the galaxy. The chamber was enormous, built to house representatives from 47 different species. Some walked on legs, others floated, and a few existed as clouds of gas contained in specialized suits. All of them were staring at her dot. She was the first human to stand before the Galactic Council. After 3 years of applications, tests, and negotiations, humanity had finally been granted membership. Chun had practiced her speech for months. She knew it by heart, but she never got the chance to give it. The massive reptilian form of Commander Krall slithered forward before Chun could speak. The Kreth Empire's military leader was 12 feet long, covered in dark green scales, and had eyes that gleamed with ancient pride. His species had been part of the Council for over 2,000 years. The matter of the human colony on Proxima Station must be addressed, Krall hissed, his translator making his words sound smooth and formal. The Kreth Empire has filed a proper claim on that territory. Our ancestors marked those stars 3 centuries ago. By Council law, it belongs to us. Chun felt her jaw tighten. Proxima Station wasn't just a mining colony. It was home to 15,000 human civilians, families, children, people who had lived there for 2 generations. That claim was filed after we already established the colony, Chun said carefully. Our people have been there for 40 years. Irrelevant, another voice chimed in. This one belonged to High Arbitrator Thal, a tall, thin being with silver skin and too many joints in his arms. The Valorians were known as the peacekeepers of the galaxy. The Kreth followed proper procedure. They surveyed, they filed, and they waited the required period. Your species was not yet part of the Council when you settled Proxima Station. Therefore, your claim has no legal standing. Chun looked around the chamber. Not a single representative seemed troubled by this. To them, it was just procedure, just rules, just the way things were done. So what happens to our people? She asked. They relocate, Krall said simply. We are generous. We will give them 3 months to leave. That is more than the minimum required time. And if we refuse? The chamber fell silent. Thal's expression didn't change, but something in his posture suggested surprise. Then you may challenge the Kreth Empire to a contest of honor. A formal battle. We would set the terms, choose the location, and both sides would meet under agreed conditions. It is how disputes are settled. Chun had studied the Council's history. She knew about their contests of honor. They were theatrical displays, almost like sporting events. Ships lined up in neat formations. Commanders announced their intentions. Everyone followed the rules. And whoever had more ships or better weapons usually won. It was a system designed to favor the powerful, the established, the old. I need to consult with my government, Chun said. Of course, Thal replied. You have 1 week to respond. The meeting ended. Chun walked out of the chamber with her small human delegation, their faces grim. They knew what was coming. Everyone knew. 3 days later, Kreth warships arrived at Proxima Station. 12 massive vessels, each one bristling with weapons and carrying thousands of soldiers. Commander Krall himself led the fleet. He broadcast a message to the human colony, giving them notice of their arrival and explaining that they would begin occupation in exactly 1 week. As Council law required, it was 0300 hours when the humans struck. The Kreth fleet wasn't expecting it. They were in standard peacetime formation, their shields at minimum power to conserve energy. Their crews were on regular shift rotations. They had no scouts out, no advanced warning systems active. Why would they? No one attacked before the formal start of a battle. It simply wasn't done. 3 human destroyers emerged from the asteroid field, where they had been hiding for 2 days. They weren't much to look at compared to the Kreth dreadnoughts. They were smaller, faster, and armed with weapons the Council considered primitive. But they had one advantage: surprise. The first Kreth ship took 4 missile strikes before its shields even activated. The explosions tore through its hull, venting atmosphere and sending debris spinning into space. The second ship managed to raise its defenses, but the human vessels had already shifted targets, focusing their fire on the supply freighters at the back of the formation. Krall roared orders from his command ship. His fleet scrambled to respond, but the humans weren't following any pattern he recognized. They didn't form lines or announce their targets. They hit and ran, striking from different angles, targeting the weakest points and disappearing before the Kreth could return fire effectively. On Proxima Station, human ground forces that had been disguised as civilians suddenly revealed themselves. They struck the Kreth landing parties before they could secure the docking bays. The fighting was close and vicious. Humans used the station's maintenance tunnels to move unseen, appearing behind Kreth positions, attacking and vanishing again. The Kreth soldiers were trained for formal combat. They knew how to hold formations, how to advance under fire, how to conduct themselves with honor. They didn't know how to fight an enemy that ignored all those rules. By the time the sun rose on Proxima Station's main settlement, the Kreth fleet was retreating. They had lost 3 ships and suffered heavy damage to 5 others. Their ground forces had been pushed back to their landing craft. The humans had won, but across the galaxy, the Council watched in horror. They attacked at night, Thal said, his voice filled with disgust. They used hidden forces. They pretended to be civilians. They struck ships that weren't ready for combat. The Council chamber was in chaos. Representatives argued, shouted, and demanded explanations. Some called for immediate action against humanity. Others wondered if they should reconsider the entire situation. Krall appeared via hologram, his scales darkened with rage. They have no honor. They fight like animals, like predators stalking prey in the dark. Chun stood before the Council again, this time not as a hopeful new member, but as a representative of a species under judgment. She kept her expression neutral, her hands clasped behind her back. "Did you know about this attack?" Thal demanded. "I recommended it," Chun said calmly. The chamber erupted. Species that had never raised their voices before were shouting. Others demanded she be removed. Some called for sanctions, for punishment, for humanity's expulsion from the Council before they had even truly joined. Thal raised one long-fingered hand, and slowly the chamber quieted. "You violated every principle of civilized warfare," he said. "You attacked without warning. You used deception. You showed no mercy to damaged vessels. You targeted supply ships. You fought from hiding. These actions are barbaric." Chun met his gaze steadily. "We won. We defended our people. And we did it with minimal casualties on both sides compared to what a formal battle would have cost." "That is not the point," Tal insisted. "Then what is the point?" Chun asked. "You created a system where the strong can take from the weak using legal paperwork, where battles are fought like games, with rules that favor whoever has the bigger fleet. You call it civilization. We call it a rigged system." Krall's hologram flickered with his rage. "You will be punished for this." Chun smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You came to our home. You threatened our people. You expected us to play by your rules or roll over and accept defeat. But here's what you don't understand about humanity. We don't fight to lose gracefully. We fight to survive. And we'll use every advantage we have to do it." The Council voted that evening. The decision was unanimous. Humanity was formally censured for barbaric warfare practices. They were given an ultimatum: adopt Council rules of engagement within 6 months, or face expulsion and possible military intervention to enforce compliance. When Chun was asked for humanity's response, she stood before the council one final time. "You want to teach us how to lose with honor," she said quietly. "We're here to teach you something else. We're here to win." The message was sent back to Earth that night. The government read it. The military read it. And every human colony across the stars read it. The Galactic Council thought they were dealing with another species that would fall in line, follow the rules, and accept their place in the established order. They were wrong. Humanity had just declared war on the very concept of civilized combat, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months had passed since Proxima Station. The Galactic Council had decided to send a message that couldn't be ignored. If humanity wouldn't learn through words and warnings, they would learn through demonstration. Admiral Cyrix of the Valorian fleet had been chosen to deliver that lesson. He was considered one of the finest military minds in Council space, a veteran of 17 formal campaigns. He had never lost a battle. His silver skin bore ritual scars that marked each victory, and his reputation was legendary. He commanded a fleet of 400 ships. Against him, humanity could muster only 150 vessels to defend Karthek Prime, their industrial world. The planet produced most of the manufacturing equipment for human colonies. Its orbital stations housed 3 million workers and their families. By every calculation, it should have been a simple demonstration. Cyrix would arrive with overwhelming force. Humanity would see the futility of resistance, and they would surrender. The Council would occupy Karthek Prime temporarily. Humanity would agree to follow proper warfare protocols, and order would be restored. Cyrix announced his approach 3 weeks in advance, as was proper. He provided the exact date and time he would arrive at Karthek Prime. He even transmitted the formation his fleet would take, allowing humanity time to prepare their defenses and evacuate civilians if they chose. Admiral Marcus Hayes received that transmission in his command center on Karthek Prime. He was younger than Cyrix, only 43 years old, and this was his first major command. He read the Valorian message twice, then called his senior officers together. "They're telling us exactly when and how they're coming," Hayes said, pulling up the tactical display. "They're giving us 3 weeks. They expect us to either run or line up our ships to meet them in open space. That's how Council battles work," his tactical officer replied. "Everything's formal. Everything's by the book." Hayes smiled. "Then I guess we should throw out the book." When Cyrix arrived at Karthek Prime with his massive fleet, he found no human vessels waiting to meet him. The orbital stations appeared abandoned. There were no communication attempts, no formal challenges, no response at all. It troubled him. His tactical displays showed the human fleet was still in the system. They were hiding behind Karthek Prime's moon, powered down to minimal emissions. They were there, but they weren't engaging. "This is Admiral Cyrix of the Valorian fleet," he broadcast on all frequencies. "I am here under the authority of the Galactic Council. Prepare your vessels for honorable combat or surrender immediately." Only silence answered him. Cyrix waited 6 hours, as protocol demanded. Then he began moving his fleet toward the planet. He would force the humans to respond. They couldn't just hide forever. That's when the first supply ship exploded. It was at the rear of his formation, a freighter carrying fuel and ammunition. One moment it was there. The next, it was an expanding bowl of fire and debris. Cyrix's sensors screamed warnings, but they couldn't identify what had hit it. Then another ship took damage, this time one of his destroyers. Something had struck it from behind, tearing through its engines. The destroyer began to tumble, losing power. "All ships, combat formation," Cyrix ordered. His fleet responded perfectly, centuries of training taking over. Ships moved into defensive positions, shields at maximum. Weapons ready, but there was nothing to shoot at. The human ships appeared in groups of 3 or 4, emerging from behind asteroids or from the shadow of the moon. They would fire at a single target, focusing all their weapons on one ship, then disappear before Cyrex's forces could respond effectively. They never stayed to fight. They just struck and vanished. Cyrex had never experienced anything like it. This wasn't battle. This was hunting. Over the next 8 hours, he lost 12 ships. Not destroyed, but damaged badly enough that they had to withdraw. His fleet was supposed to be demonstrating council superiority. Instead, they were being picked apart. Where are they getting their targeting data? His tactical officer asked. They know exactly where our weakest ships are positioned. The answer came 2 hours later when one of Cyrex's communications officers discovered that their encrypted channels had been compromised. The humans had been inside their network for days, listening to every order, reading every tactical plan. They knew what Cyrex was going to do before he did it. Lock down all communications, Cyrex ordered. Switch to hardline only. But the damage was done. The humans had been feeding his fleet false intelligence, moving phantom ships across his sensors, making him think they were in positions they weren't. Half of what his tactical display showed was lies. Cyrex made his decision. He would advance with his main battle group directly toward Carthage Prime and force a confrontation. The humans couldn't hide forever, and once he brought his heavy dreadnoughts into play, their small hit-and-run tactics wouldn't matter. His fleet moved forward in a tight formation. He kept his strongest ships at the front, weapons charged, ready for anything. The humans were waiting. As Cyrex's fleet entered the debris field between Carthage Prime and its moon, the trap was sprung. What his sensors had marked as ordinary debris suddenly activated. Hundreds of autonomous weapons, hidden among the wreckage, came to life. They were crude devices, nothing sophisticated. Just missiles with basic guidance systems and proximity triggers. But there were so many of them. Cyrex's fleet took heavy damage in the first 30 seconds. Ships were forced to break formation to avoid the incoming fire. And that's when the human fleet appeared, all of it at once, emerging from the far side of the moon at full burn. But Cyrex's tactical displays showed twice as many ships as humans actually had. He split his fire, targeting vessels that didn't exist, while the real human ships focused on his damaged vessels. Those aren't all real, his tactical officer shouted. Half of them are drones. The truth hit Cyrex like a physical blow. The humans had created decoys, simple ships that showed up on sensors, but had no real weapons or defenses. They looked real enough to draw fire, and in the chaos of battle, his gunners couldn't tell the difference until it was too late, and some of those drones weren't empty. Some were packed with explosives, accelerating directly toward his largest ships. Cyrex watched in horror as one of his dreadnoughts tried to destroy an incoming drone, only to discover too late that it was a kamikaze weapon. The explosion tore through the dreadnought's forward shields, crippling it. All ships, emergency retreat, Cyrex ordered. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a slaughter, but the humans weren't done. As his fleet tried to withdraw, they pursued. And this time, they showed no mercy. Ships that were already damaged and drifting took additional fire. Escape pods launching from crippled vessels were tracked and targeted. They're firing on escape pods, Cyrex's communications officer said, his voice shocked. That's against every law of warfare. Cyrex broadcast on all frequencies. We surrender. Our damaged vessels are withdrawing. By council law, you must cease fire. Hayes' voice came back, cold and clear. You came to my home. You brought 400 ships to teach us a lesson. Now you get to learn one instead. We don't stop until the threat is gone. The attack continued for another hour. By the time Cyrex's fleet reached the edge of the system, He had lost 63 ships destroyed or 2 damaged to jump to FTL. Another 100 had taken significant damage. His proud fleet, the one that had never lost a battle, was running in disorder. The human fleet hadn't lost a single ship, though several were damaged. The galaxy watched. Every species with sensors in the region saw it. The Council's peacekeeping demonstration had turned into a humiliating defeat. In the Council chambers, the emergency session was tense. Representatives demanded answers. How had this happened? How had a primitive species defeated the Valorian fleet? Thal called for order, his silver face darker than usual. This cannot stand. Humanity has now defeated 2 Council fleets using barbaric tactics. They must be brought to heel. But there was uncertainty in his voice. For the first time in millennia, the Council faced a species that didn't just break their rules, but made those rules look obsolete. An ancient representative spoke up, one from the Archon Collective. They rarely attended Council sessions anymore. Their species so old, they were almost mythical. The Archon's voice was dry and dusty, like wind over dead worlds. This has happened before, the Archon said. 10,000 years ago. Another species fought this way. We dealt with them then. We can deal with humanity now. How did you deal with them? Someone asked. The Archon's smile was terrible to see. We removed them from existence. Every world, every ship, every trace. It took 20 years, but we succeeded. We can do it again. The chamber fell silent. Representatives looked at each other, weighing the cost of such an action. Hayes's message to Earth was brief. They won't stop with words anymore. They're coming for us. All of them. Humanity had won 2 battles. But the war was just beginning, and the enemy was the entire galaxy. The attack came without warning, and that was what shocked the galaxy most. The Council, which had spent millennia demanding honor and formal declarations of war, had decided that humanity didn't deserve such courtesies anymore. 17 human colonies were hit simultaneously. The coalition fleet consisted of ships from 12 different species, all funded and equipped by the Archon Collective. They came in overwhelming numbers, and they came in silence. Maya Rodriguez was working in the hydroponics bay of New Santos Colony when the attack began. She heard the explosions first, distant and muffled through the colony's walls. Then the alarms started screaming. She ran toward the shelter areas, joining thousands of others in the corridors. Children were crying. People were shouting questions that no one could answer. The colony's defense grid lasted 17 minutes. Then the shields failed, and the bombardment began in earnest. Maya made it to a shelter with her daughter, just as the section above them collapsed. They huddled in the darkness, listening to the destruction of everything they had built. New Santos fell in 6 hours. 15,000 dead. The same scene played out across 16 other worlds. Some colonies lasted longer than others, but none of them had the military forces to hold against the coordinated assault. The coalition wasn't taking prisoners. They weren't offering surrender terms. They were eliminating the problem that humanity represented. Earth's defense fleet was scattered across dozens of systems. Each base received the same desperate calls for help, and each one faced the same terrible calculation. They couldn't save everyone. They couldn't even save most of them. General Sophia Reeves stood in Earth's primary command center, watching the tactical displays update with each new report. Each red marker was a colony lost, a world burning, thousands or millions dead. Her jaw was tight, her hands clenched behind her back. "We need to respond," her second-in-command said. "We need to send ships? To where?" Reeves asked quietly. "They're hitting 17 targets at once. We send our fleet to save one, we lose the others. We split up, we're too weak to save any of them. So we do nothing?" Reeves turned to look at him. Her eyes were cold. No, we do something the galaxy has never seen before. We show them what total war actually means. Every human military vessel in existence received the same order: return to Earth immediately. Every civilian ship capable of mounting weapons was requisitioned. Every colony that survived the initial assault was evacuated to hidden stations in deep space. Every piece of military hardware, every weapon, every soldier was pulled back. For 2 weeks, the galaxy saw nothing from humanity. No responses to hails. No broadcasts. No ships moving in any system. The coalition thought they had won. Some species celebrated. Others watched nervously, wondering if humanity had simply been wiped out entirely. Then the counterattack began. It started with the logistics networks. The coalition fleet was massive, but it needed supplies. Fuel, ammunition, food, water, replacement parts. All of it flowed through a network of supply stations and transport routes that had been established over centuries. Human ships, small and fast, began hunting those supply lines. They didn't fight the warships. They destroyed freighters, sabotaged fuel depots, and released digital viruses into the logistics computers that tracked everything. Within a week, the coalition fleet was struggling to keep itself supplied. On the Kreth homeworld, something went wrong with the water treatment systems. By the time technicians figured out what had happened, 3 million civilians were sick. The contamination was subtle, non-lethal, but it overwhelmed the medical system. Later analysis would show that someone had released a biological agent specifically designed to target Kreth. Physiology. The Valorian military headquarters suffered a catastrophic computer failure. Every navigation chart in their database was corrupted. Ships couldn't jump to FTL safely. It would take months to restore the data from backup start, and then the assassinations started. Commander Krall was in his quarters on the Kreth flagship when the attack came. His personal guards died first, killed by weapons that made no sound. Krall managed to trigger the alarm before the human special forces team reached him, but it didn't matter. They left his body in his command chair, a message for anyone who found him. You wanted war. This is what it looks like. 3 more species lost their military leadership in similar attacks over the next month. The coalition tried to increase security, but it didn't help. The humans seemed to know where every important target would be, and they struck with precision. The psychological impact was devastating. Coalition commanders started refusing to sleep in their own quarters. They varied their schedules randomly. They stopped attending meetings in person. And still, the attacks continued. The coalition species began broadcasting their captured human soldiers, showing them in cages, trying to use them as leverage. Humanity's response was swift and brutal. They released the names, addresses, and family details of every coalition commander, every political leader, every decision-maker who had supported the war. The message was clear. You touch our people, we touch yours. Some coalition ships tried to surrender. The humans took their supplies and destroyed the ships anyway, leaving the crews stranded in escape pods. We learned from you, the human commander broadcast. You showed us at Karthik Prime what happens to those who threaten our homes. On the Valorian homeworld, High Arbitrator Thal received a package. Inside was a data chip containing video of the New Santis attack. He watched the footage of human civilians dying, children burning, structures collapsing. At the end of the video was a simple message. You could have left us alone. You chose this. The coalition began to fracture. 8 species announced they were withdrawing from the conflict. Their leaders claimed they had been deceived by the Archon Collective, that they hadn't understood what the war would actually entail. In truth, they were terrified. Their homeworlds were vulnerable, their fleets were being picked apart, and they couldn't even identify where the next attack would come from. The war dragged on for 6 months. And in that time, humanity revealed just how vicious they could be. They used biological weapons tailored to specific species. They spread false intelligence that caused coalition fleets to fire on each other. They hacked the life support systems. They poisoned food supplies. They did everything necessary to break the will of their enemies, and it worked. The coalition fleets limped home. The survivors carried stories that would become nightmares. They spoke of human soldiers who didn't take prisoners, of ships that appeared from nowhere and vanished like ghosts, of warfare that ignored every rule, every custom, every principle that the galaxy considered sacred. But while humanity had won, the cost was staggering. 17 colonies were dead or abandoned. Millions had died. And humanity itself had become something dark and terrible in the eyes of the galaxy. In the council chambers, the Archon Collective called for an emergency vote. They released ancient records, documents from 10,000 years ago, showing another species that had fought the same way. The records showed how that species had been hunted down and exterminated. Every world burned, every ship destroyed, until nothing remained. The Archons proposed the same solution for humanity. The vote was scheduled for 1 month. Every council species would decide: let humanity exist, or remove them completely from the galaxy. The Archons were confident. They had the numbers. They had the fear. They had history on their side, but they didn't have the whole truth. And Ambassador Chun was about to reveal it. The council chamber had never been so full. Every species had sent representatives, and many had sent their highest leaders. The vote on humanity's fate was too important to delegate to mere ambassadors. The gallery was packed with observers from across the galaxy. Every news service was broadcasting. This would be the most important decision the council had made in 1,000 years. Ambassador Keiko Chun walked to the center of the chamber alone. She wore her uniform now, not the diplomatic robe she'd arrived in years ago. Her face was scarred from a shipboarding action during the war. She carried no notes, no data pads, no prepared remarks. The Archon Collective's speaker was an ancient being that existed primarily as a consciousness within a mechanical frame. Its voice echoed through the chamber like something from the void between stars. "We are here to decide humanity's fate," the Archon said. "The evidence is clear. This species cannot coexist with civilized society. They are brutal, savage, and incapable of following the rules that bind our community together. 10,000 years ago, we faced a similar threat. We eliminated it. We must do so again." The chamber was silent. Representatives looked at each other, weighing the decision. Many had already decided how they would vote. The fear was too strong. Humanity was too dangerous. Chun stepped forward. "Before you vote, I want to tell you a story. It's about the Archon Collective and the real reason they created the council." The Archon's mechanical frame turned toward her. "You have no right to speak. You stand accused." "I have every right," Chun said calmly, "because what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about galactic history." She activated her datapad, and images appeared on the chamber's main display. They were ancient, recovered from human archaeological expeditions across dozens of worlds. Records that predated the council by thousands of years. 10,000 years ago, the Archons weren't peacekeepers. Chun began. They were conquerors. They enslaved half the galaxy. Species that resisted were crushed. Species that surrendered became servants. It was an empire built on force and maintained by fear. "Lies," the Archon said, but there was something uncertain in its voice. Chun continued. "But some species refused to stay slaves. They learned to fight back. They learned to use tactics that the Archon military wasn't prepared for. Ambushes, sabotage, guerrilla warfare, assassination, all the things you now call barbaric. And it worked. The slave species began winning. She pulled up more images. Battle records. Casualty reports. Strategic analyses. All from the Archon's own archives, recovered from a forgotten data cache on a dead world. The Archons were losing, Chun said. Their formal military tactics couldn't handle an enemy that refused to fight by the rules. So they did something clever. They didn't just defeat the rebellion. They rewrote history. The chamber was completely silent now. Every being was watching the display, seeing the evidence accumulate. They created the council, Chun explained. They sold it as a way to prevent future wars, to bring peace and order to the galaxy. But the real purpose was control. By making warfare ritualized and formal, they ensured that no species could ever use the tactics that had nearly defeated them. They made it against the law to fight effectively. She looked directly at the Archon. You didn't eliminate that ancient species because they were barbaric. You eliminated them because they had figured out how to beat you. And then you spent 10,000 years making sure no one else would learn those lessons. The Archon's mechanical frame was motionless. Around the chamber, representatives were talking among themselves, checking the data Chen had provided, and realizing it was authentic. Everything you call civilized warfare is a lie, Chen said. It's not about honor or ethics. It's about making sure the powerful stay powerful. It's about ensuring that species with smaller fleets, fewer resources, and less territory can never threaten the established order. Arbitrator Thal stood slowly. Even if this is true, it doesn't excuse what humanity has done. You have killed millions. You have committed atrocities. Chun turned to him. Show them the new Santos footage. The 17 colonies your coalition destroyed. Show them who attacked first. Show them who killed civilians without warning or mercy. Thal hesitated. The footage appeared on the display anyway, broadcast from dozens of sources simultaneously. The galaxy watched human colonies burn. They saw civilian structures targeted. They saw children running through fire. They saw the coalition doing everything they accused humanity of doing, except humanity's crimes had been in response. We didn't want this war, Chun said quietly. We asked to be left alone. We asked to defend our people. We asked for the right to survive. And you told us the only acceptable option was to follow rules designed to make us lose. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as she could. I'm not going to tell you we're innocent. We're not. We did terrible things during the war. We became the monsters you feared. But ask yourselves this. If your homeworld was burning, if your families were dying, if extinction was the only alternative, would you fight with honor? Or would you fight to live? The Archon spoke again, its voice urgent now. This changes nothing. Humanity is still too dangerous. They still fight without honor. They still threaten everything we have built. What you've built is a prison, a new voice said. It was a young representative from the Kreth Empire, someone who had lost family in the war. You've built a system where we can't defend ourselves effectively, where we can't fight to truly win, where the only option is to play by rules that favor the old and the powerful. Other voices joined in. Younger species, ones who had watched humanity's war with fascination rather than horror. Ones who had begun to question why their own militaries were so ineffective, so bound by tradition and protocol. The chamber erupted in debate. The Archon tried to call for order, tried to push for the vote, but the moment had passed. Too many species were questioning. Too many were angry at the deception. The vote, when it finally happened, was close. Humanity survived by 7 votes. Not because the galaxy suddenly loved humans, but because enough species decided that the truth mattered more than fear. But the Archon Collective couldn't accept it. As the vote results were announced, the Archon's mechanical frame straightened. If the Council will not act, we will, the Archon said. We have fleet assets that predate the Council itself. Ships from our Empire days, kept in reserve. We will eliminate humanity with or without your approval. Chun had been expecting this. Then you'll have to go through us too, she said. On the display, dozens of ships appeared. They were from the younger species, the ones who had voted to spare humanity. They had positioned themselves around Earth's system, ready to defend it. The Archon hesitated. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Council was supposed to be unified. Species weren't supposed to take sides against the collective. Stand down, Thal said quietly. It's over. It will never be over, the Archon replied. Not while humanity exists. The Archon fleet arrived at Earth 3 weeks later. It was enormous, ships that hadn't been seen in millennia, weapons that were thought to be only myths. They expected to face humanity alone, an easy slaughter. Instead, they faced a united fleet. 40 species had sent ships. Not all of them, not even most, but enough. Young species tired of being controlled. Species who saw an opportunity to break the old order. Species who simply believed humanity deserved to exist. The battle lasted 2 days. The Archon fleet was powerful, but it was fighting technology from an ancient era against modern weapons and tactics. And this time, those modern tactics weren't constrained by rules. Human commanders coordinated with alien allies, sharing everything they had learned about unconventional warfare. Ships from a dozen species executed ambush, feints, and coordinated strikes that the Archon forces couldn't predict or counter. When the Archon flagship finally fell, humanity broadcast the footage to every system in the galaxy. The ancient collective, the hidden controllers, the architects of 10,000 years of control, had been defeated. The Council reformed after that. Not immediately, and not without struggle, but it happened. New rules were written. Rules that allowed actual self-defense. Rules that acknowledged that survival sometimes required hard choices. Rules that didn't favor the old and powerful by default. 50 years later, Admiral Marcus Hayes stood before a classroom full of alien military cadets. He was old now, his hair white, his body bent with age. But his eyes were still sharp. "You all know why you're here," he said to the class. "You're here to learn human military tactics. You call them brutal. Your parents call them savage. The history books call them the methods that changed the galaxy." He moved slowly to the display screen, pulling up footage from the battles at Proxima Station, Karthuk Prime, and Earth. "We didn't invent these tactics," Hayes continued. "Humans have been fighting this way since. We climbed down from trees and picked up rocks. Ambush, deception, targeting leadership, using terrain, striking from hiding. These aren't innovations. They're survival instincts." A young Valorian cadet raised his hand. "But isn't honor important? Aren't rules necessary?" Hayes smiled sadly. "Honor matters in peacetime. Rules matter when everyone follows them."